Thank you. Welcome to this subject overview and Scrutiny Committee 2 meeting, which has been convened as a hybrid meeting. The meeting has been recorded and will be available via the Council's website to be viewed subsequently. Everyone participating in the meeting will be accessing it either from the Council Chamber, Civic Offices in Angel Street, Bridgend, or from remote locations. Should I, as the Chair, experience any technical difficulties during the meeting, Councillor Alan Wathen will step in and take over temporarily as Chair in my absence. Please can everyone ensure that mobile phones are switched off or switched to silent mode. Members will have received an electronic copy of the agenda, and I will ask the officer to present a brief summary of the key points. For the record, the agenda can be viewed on the Council's website. Officers and members are reminded to refer to the page numbers contained in the public version of the agenda report pack. Members and officers will be speaking at various points during the meeting, and those speaking may switch their microphones on at that point, but I would ask that with the exception of myself as chairperson, at all of the times you keep your microphones switched off, as this will help to minimise any background noise and interference. However, I would invite members and officers to leave their cameras on for the duration of the meeting as agreed at the recent full council meeting. Whether attending in the chamber or remotely, if any members or officers wish to raise a point or a question, they should press the hands up icon on the screen on the top right hand side of the Microsoft Teams window. I will come to you in the order that I received the requests. If you're in the chamber, please switch on the microphone on your desk and speak directly into the mic to allow those who are remote to hear you clearly. Please lower your hand once you've finished speaking. The instant messaging chat button has been disabled for this meeting. Please do not use your microphone until I invite you to do so. Officers from Scrutiny will be supporting the meeting and will be monitoring the use of microphones throughout its duration, and where necessary, will mute those not being used. I will ask officers to introduce themselves, and when I invite them to speak during the course of the meeting, they too should ensure that microphones and cameras are switched off when not in use. I will now proceed to the agenda. So, item 1, apologies for absence. I will now ask the Scrutiny Officer to announce the apologies for the absences received. Rachel.
Thank you, Chair. I've received apologies from Councillor Richard Williams and Councillor Ross Thomas. Many thanks.
Thank you. And I've also had a message that Councillor Paul Davis is potentially going to be late in for the meeting, but coming in hopefully. Item 2, declarations of interest. If any member has an interest to declare in any matter on the agenda, please click on the raised hand icon and I will come to you in turn for you to declare your interest. Approval of minutes. Can I have a mover and a seconder for the minutes of January the 19th, 2024, please?
Yeah,
I move, Chair. Second.
Right, I'm going to go with Alan as moving and Max as seconding, please. Thank you. Cheers. And then item 4, social services and wellbeing, commissioning strategies for 2023 to 28. I'll ask the officer to briefly introduce the report, and then I will call upon the members who indicate they wish to speak by clicking on the raised hand icon in turn. Thank you very much.
Chair, my colleague Pete Tyson, who's joined online, is going to present the report this morning.
Thank you, Claire, and thank you, Chair, as well. So for those who don't know me, my name's Pete Tyson, and I'm the Group Manager for Commissioning within the Social Services and Wellbeing Directorate. So in terms of the report itself, so it highlights the work undertaken in the development of 3 commissioning strategies, which have been developed across the Social Services and Wellbeing Directorate. So the purpose of bringing them here today is to get some feedback from yourselves, so from the committee, prior to the finalisation of the strategies and submission to Cabinet for approval in early 2024, so hopefully kind of March, April time. So in terms of the reports themselves, they're very much done in conjunction with some things that we have to do on a kind of legislative and regulatory basis. So this is where there are population needs assessments and also market stability reports as well. So in terms of the background section, paragraph 2.2 refers to the Regional Partnership Board, and as part of this what we have to do is an assessment of both the sufficiency and stability of services across the Social Services and Wellbeing Directorate, and this covers both adult social care and children's services as well. So take it to the top of page 10. I've referred there to some of the stuff that has to be done on a kind of a national and regulatory kind of basis. So we have the market stability report, which, as I've mentioned, this is assessment of the services that we have in place. So how much have we got? Have we got what we need, and does it deliver what is needed? And we also have the population needs assessment as well. And as mentioned earlier, this is stuff that we have to do under kind of regulation and as part of the Social Services and Wellbeing Act. The intention with doing these pieces of work is very much it sets out kind of what is needed and what we've currently got. So it's almost like you're mapping and gapping, and it's the fundamentals of commissioning. And the intention is then for these have informed, so regional area plans, they've informed regional commissioning strategies, and we also have regional kind of market position statements in place here. So what we did to inform those is lots of work, lots of analysis and lots of engagement as well. So we linked in with the kind of wider population of Bridgend to help kind of inform these pieces of work. So what we've done is they've developed then regional plans and then strategies, but now what these are very much the local ones. So what do these actually mean for the people of Bridgend? So that's the basis for us developing these strategies. So as you say, the market stability report was endorsed by council in July 2022, and now kind of beneath these we've got our subsequent commissioning strategies which have been developed. We've done these across the three main kind of population areas. So this is very much kind of children, young person services, so i.e. those up to the age of 18. We also have adults with lifelong conditions and complex needs. This is very much our kind of working age adults. And then we also have our regulated community care, which is predominantly older person services. And as you'll note from the appendices, this is how they've kind of been broken down and set out in the commissioning strategies themselves. In terms of the governance and kind of how we've developed these, we've reviewed our kind of governance and kind of planning structure within Social Services and Wellbeing Directorate. So at the top of page 11, it sets out kind of how all these kind of interlink and how they've kind of been developed really. So we have our improving outcomes for the Joneses panel. This is very much our transformation board, and beneath this we again have these three kind of planning group areas, and this is where kind of we've developed the strategies linked to these planning group areas. Each of the groups is chaired by head of service, and we have the relevant kind of officers as part of those, and very much that's being kind of the driver for all the work that has been undertaken. So then what that does is that feeds up then into the improving outcomes for the Joneses panel, and then here today now we're coming to scrutiny for kind of the review and feedback of our strategies, and then subsequent kind of approval of the strategies themselves. So the commissioning strategy set out how current services will need to change into that 5 years is intentional. It links to those regional documents we mentioned earlier on in terms of the regional area plans and also our own corporate plan as well. So in terms of the time period is 2023 up to 2028. And you'll notice that the structure and the format of the plans are very much consistent as well, because we wanted that consistency and standardization across each of the strategies, where fundamentally there's information on where are we now, what's the current position, what's the driver for the change. And we've mentioned the population needs assessment, market stability reports, which are the main drivers for change, and what kind of our proposed commissioning intentions and priority kind of areas for action are over the next 5 years. The kind of the priority areas, they're as detailed as they can be at this stage, but it should be noted that further details in respect of kind of timescales and precise resource implications will be known kind of later on. If we'd kind of looked to finalise these strategies even say 12-18 months ago, the financial position did look very different then. Obviously we've all we're going through one of the toughest kind of rounds of budget setting that we've done in a very long time, so it's a case of that's intentional. So we didn't necessarily want to commit ourselves to something that we might not necessarily be able to deliver. So what it gives us is very much a line of sight, a direction of travel, but then the precise nature of what we can actually do obviously will be dependent on business justifications and available resources at that time. As I mentioned earlier on, so point 3.4, the strategies have been developed using regional data such as market stability reports, population needs assessment, as well as our local data as well. We have utilised the support of the Institute of Public Care, who are our commissioned improvement partner, and they've assisted us in the development of these strategies. And they've very much acted as a critical friend. And IPC do work across Wales, they work across the UK, and even wider than that as well. So what they've done is brought some of their kind of knowledge and skills to the table as well to help us in the development of these strategies. So at the bottom of page 11, what I'll probably do is I'll talk through the priority areas that have been identified as opposed to going through each of the appendices, because they are quite kind of hefty documents, 15 to 20 pages each of them. So what I've done within the report is pulled out the key and pertinent kind of priority areas. And what we've done is we've split them out into accommodation-based priority areas and non-accommodation-based priority areas. So as I mentioned, but we've got them kind of categorized by age. So in terms of the children, young people and transition one, the accommodation-based priority areas are very much around residential provision, additional residential provision, but also suitable residential provision as well to enable flexibility, especially for children, young people with complex needs. At this moment in time, there are a high level of high cost and out of county placements being made. So what we're looking to do is if we can create bespoke kind of residential options, which are kind of better value for money, more cost effective for us, then that's very much a priority area, a driver for us. And this also includes the second bullet point in the sub list there is supported accommodation and move on options as well, very much to prepare for independent living. And also the relocation, remodelling, refurbishment of existing residential services as well. So we're also a deliverer, a provider of residential services and accommodation-based services and children's services. So it's just making sure that we have the most appropriate kind of buildings to deliver those services. We also have a list here. There's 5 kind of non-accommodation based priority areas. So one of these is placement support service to ensure the right multi-agency and therapeutic input for children. Kind of refining, developing our internal fostering services as well, which again, going back to the budget setting conversations we had, we know internal fostering services is more cost effective. So it's a case of developing and really building our internal fostering provision there. Review and strengthen accommodation pathways for children leaving care, strengthening our offer of support for children with disabilities and their families, and also strengthening our support for children who are at risk or likely to be at risk of child exploitation as well. It should also be noted at this stage that there's also a separate strategy being developed, again with the support of the Institute of Public Care, in respect of our early help services for families and family support services as well. So that is a big old area in its own right. So that's why there is a separate strategy being developed there, but we do make reference to it in this particular strategy. The next population area, then we have this kind of working age adults with lifelong conditions and complex needs. So in terms of the accommodation based areas, so this is looking at core and cluster accommodation community living networks. So this is very much trying to encourage and instill that kind of independent living, looking at those options, expanding our supported living services. This is where individuals, they'll kind of have their own tenancies, but we do have care and support in there. Often it's 24/7 support. So that's where we're looking at the core and cluster options, whether it has to be 24/7 in each of those schemes, or whether we can have kind of outreach elements as part of that. Again, looking for value for money, but also the right thing to do for the individuals in terms of looking to encourage and maintain independence as best as possible. Reviewing and remodelling our emergency, short stay and respite accommodation, and also looking at accessible adapted accommodation as well in terms of this area. What I should say at this stage is what we've done is we've kind of encapsulate the accommodation based priority areas across the whole of adult social care. So we do have specific kind of work streams and kind of projects set up looking at accommodation based services across the board, because what we don't want to do is be working in silos and potentially doing one thing over here whilst we're doing something else over there. So what we are doing is we're kind of consolidating these. So although we do have the 3 commissioning strategies, it's very much with that kind of one council approach in terms of how we're doing that and linking in with key partners in terms of the development and subsequent implementation thereafter. In terms of the non-accommodation based priority areas, the expansion and diversification of our shared lives scheme. So this is our adult placement scheme, historically predominantly very much learning disability focused, but we're looking at potentially broadening, expanding that. And this is working with our partner there, which is the Vale of Glamorgan Council on that one. So there's lots of work happening in that area already. Strengthening our specialist care and support at home community services. So obviously massive driver under the social services and wellbeing act is to maintain that independent living. So we need to make sure that we have the relevant kind of care and support services in place to allow that us to do that. A big one here is the review and remodelling of our community hubs, daytime opportunities and social activities. And this is one of those, we do make reference to it a bit later on in the report, where we do have kind of midterm financial strategies kind of linked to these key areas of work. So that's a key area for us as part of this one, and also strengthening skills for independence and employability as well. So lots of these are kind of interlinked, interwoven, and this is why, as we say, we have the governance, we have the various planning groups, but they do then feed up to improving outcomes for the Joneses and the capital boards that have been established as well. So it's a case of, so we can kind of consider those prioritization, and then if we are kind of going to be following these on, then potential bids for capital and business justifications being developed. So we do have the governance and oversight, but we can look at that bigger picture planning as well. And then the third and final area in terms of the commissioning strategies that have been developed is the regulated community care. And as I mentioned, this predominantly for our older person services. So this tends to be kind of residential, nursing homes, extra care, and also the traditional kind of independent domiciliary care as well. So in terms of the accommodation-based priority areas, is developing kind of housing with care and extra care provision sufficient to meet future need and demand. A lot of the detail is within each of the strategies. So I'm giving you a bit of a whistle-stop, high-level kind of tour of the commissioning strategies. But within each of the documents, we have the facts and figures in terms of demographic changes, ageing populations, increasing dementia rates, etc. So a lot of the facts and figures are within the documents themselves. So within appendices A, B, and C, the commissioning strategies themselves. And a key thing here, and I mentioned this, the reprofile and remodelling of our accommodation-based services. And this is both internal and commissioned as well. Did mention children's services in adult social care. We're also a provider of care home services and also extra care services. So it's really understanding, are we delivering what is needed? Are we delivering what has been kind of pulling through as part of the population needs assessment and also the market stability reports as well? In terms of the non-accommodation based priority areas within this particular population group, it's also implementing the reablement reset program in our internal home care services. And in kind of simplistic terms, this is very much our short-term services. So we have our kind of enabling, reabling assessment services. And we know that when individuals do go through our kind of reablement services, then it really mitigates the need for longer term care. So it's a case of if you get it right upstream, then potentially you can mitigate that. Again, going back to the pound sign about the kind of challenging financial position. So this is why there's been a real drive in terms of how are our internal services established? How can we kind of get that early intervention, get that reablement program instilled as early as possible? So that's been a key priority area identified there. And also then when there are the longer term needs identified, how do we utilise our independent domiciliary care services? So we do have commissioned providers who deliver in the region of kind of 80% of our home care hours and packages of care. So we need to make sure that they're working in the best, most effective way and the most outcome focused way as possible. So that's another one of those priority areas as well. As I mentioned earlier on, so at the bottom of page 12, we do make reference to there being clear links with both capital and revenue funding for our accommodation-based services, and this emphasises the importance of robust business justification cases being developed, as well as effective governance, which was shown in the earlier tables. The reports themselves, so paragraph 3.8, I do make reference, some of you may have picked up, we haven't got the BCBC kind of branding, so they will kind of be looked at and also will need to translate obviously in accordance with the Welsh language requirements as well. But we didn't want to necessarily do all that work and then for there to be change afterwards. So just for you to be aware that we will obviously do the branding and any translation as required once the reports are finalised prior to them being published where they need to do so. In terms of equality impact and initial screening, the current versions of the strategies have identified there would be no negative impact on those protected characteristics or the Welsh language, but obviously as and when specific things are being kind of developed and implemented, we will be doing further EIAs at that stage as well. In terms of the well-being of future generations, this very much goes hand in hand with the Social Services and Wellbeing Act. So in terms of the long-term nature, the Strategic Commissioning Plan develops a long-term, covering that 5-year period. Prevention is very much a driver for this, and again, it's in keeping with the Social Services and Wellbeing Act. Again, integration, working with partners, etc., such as Morgannwg Health Board. In particular, the working age adults, that there's very close working in terms of some of those supported living services. Collaboration, both internal and external collaboration, will be kind of necessary to effectively implement the priority areas, and that collaboration has informed these strategies as well in terms of how the population needs assessment and also the market stability reports have been produced and developed. Involvement. There was extensive consultation undertaken with individuals, both in receipt of services, carers, families, to inform the population needs assessment and market stability reports. And if we think about it, that's kind of been the driver. That's what's kind of been the foundation of our own commissioning strategies. But as and when we are looking at implementation of specific priority areas, so for example, if we are looking at additional kind of children's services, children's residential, we will be doing consultation and engagement at that stage, because we have received feedback. There's a lot of kind of consultation and engagement going on, and the feedback we are getting is consult with us when you're actually doing something, so that we've listened to what individuals are saying in respect of that. There are no direct.
Sorry, Pete. I'm just going to interrupt you 1 second. Normally we have quite a brief overview at the start, so
Yeah.
I don't really want to curtail you, but I think we're going into rather more in-depth analysis here than we usually do. So I'm just going to ask if we can be a little briefer, if that's okay, please.
Yeah, no
Thank
problem
you.
at all.
Cheers.
Yeah, no worries. Well, just I guess to summarise, no direct financial implications at this stage. However, they will be kind of firmed up as and when schemes are finalised and being implemented. And going back to the MTFS, there is a significant overspend position. So this is where a lot of the priority areas have been developed, is to address some of those kind of financial kind of overspend, the challenging positions there. The key one being children's services placements as well. So the final line under the financial implications, there's implementation of the strategies will need to be done in line with funding available through the MTFS. So in terms of the recommendations, it's recommended that Scrutiny will note the contents of the report and provide any feedback on the strategies themselves prior to submitting to Cabinet for approval. As I say, hopefully March, April this year.
Thank you very much. That's lovely. Right. So, members, you will have read all of the pack and all of the draft strategy that we've got here. And I think as well, it's worth noting that it's ambitious. It's very ambitious, and that is to be applauded. However, equally as well, as Pete himself has noted, we are in difficult, dire straits financially. So really, I think a lot of the questions that run from members through this report is just exactly how achievable, and if achievable, how sustainable this would be. Because, as I say, it's great. It is to be commended, and I absolutely take my hat off to yourselves in social services, because we do a lot of innovation. We do a lot of good change. We bring a lot of things in, but equally as well, this directorate is one of the ones with the highest spend at the moment. So is this achievable? Because obviously it's going to cost money. Where is that money coming from? That's the common thread that's going to run through this with questioning. So just to give you a heads up there, that's what we're going to be asking you. Where's the money? Show us the money. So I'll bring Jane in, and then I'll come to you, Claire.
Thank you very much, Chair. I think the first thing to note is it's not about the money, it's always about the right thing. We should always do the right thing for our residents in Bridgend, and we have to do it in a person-centred, cooperative way. What I would say is this is spend to save, because we're spending this money anyway, and we have a statutory obligation to look after whoever it is, whether that's a child coming into residential accommodation, whether that's into a foster care placement, whether that's a more mature resident, I want to say, going into some nursing or some supported accommodation, but we need to do it differently. And if we don't do it differently, looking at our population needs assessment, we're going to crash and burn. And that's the whole purpose behind this. We need to have, you know, it's well rehearsed with me. I am saying to everyone, we need a different conversation with our residents. We need to manage those expectations. I don't want all these children in care. I'd much prefer them to be at home with their families, that we support them much earlier so that we don't get into the position of having to take them into statutory services, because that's a failing to us as a council, and that's a failing to those young people. And I think the other thing that I would say is we've got to invest in the right things. We're investing an awful lot of money, as you referred to, Chair. The overspend in the council currently is within children's services as a mainstay. We need to spend that money differently, and we need to ensure that whatever we're doing is going to support us. And I don't want to just say in 5 years' time, as Pete's referenced for the commissioning strategies, these need to be right in 20 years' time, because we've got an ageing population and we've got less and less young people to deliver those services. So we do need to think radically. We do need to think very differently about how we're delivering lots of services. It's not just social services across the board in this council. But I think that, you know, I'm all up for debate, scrutiny. Please bring it on, members. I look forward to it on an early Monday morning.
Thank you. Just to come back on what you have said, because you do, I know you do. You're saying there that it's spend to save, totally agree with that, and that we'd be spending the money anyway. However, it has to be noted that that money, at the moment, we have a budget, we're in an overspend. This again is an ask of that overspend, and we shouldn't really be in that overspend. So we need to look at the budget as a whole, really, don't we? And bring that overspend down and then spend within that, because that is the money that we should be spending, and we're not at the moment. We're in an overspend, if that makes sense, yeah?
So thank you very much, Chair. So what I would say is I think we need to refer back to our base budget. Currently, we do not have the money, and we do not have the service provision to deliver services, whether it be in adults or children's, for the demands that we have.
Yeah.
And the demand that we have to support. So I want us to do it differently, very, very differently. Because if we don't, the overspends are going to continue.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that we're coming to you with this strategy. We've already been into CCMB and we've told them this is what we need from CCMB. We need you to support us. And we also need to look at the base budget in as a whole, is what I want to say. And we need to look at where the spend is across the board, because otherwise I don't know how we're going to sustain, you know. And social services isn't seen as the sexy portfolio. It's one of the hardest portfolios. It doesn't matter to me that it's sexy. We need to understand with the people out there what exactly we can do, what exactly they can expect from us, and we need to understand what they can do to support themselves. And our local communities, they deliver the best solutions. It's not us as statutory stakeholders. The best solutions for our residents out there are the non-statutory services, that third sector, and families and other people's support. It's not all about us wading in there and doing things to people that they don't necessarily want done either.
No, and I completely agree with you that actually we do have to think about things differently. And this directorate, I have said publicly, is an exemplar directory for doing that. I think other directorates in this council could learn an example, because the innovation that comes through from this directorate is superb, and that is to be applauded. I think part of the question is that obviously budget, overspend, and now we're looking at this far-reaching, but it's a spend to save. Are we going to have that overlap, and how are we going to sustain that overlap? Because obviously it is going to cost money. It's going to cost to implement it in the first instance. So I think that's going to be the commonality of the threads throughout as well from members. So I'm going to bring Claire in. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. And you know, just to give assurance, really, we absolutely understand the context that we're operating in as a council and as public services. And I won't repeat what the Deputy Leader has said, but also just to give assurance, this commissioning strategy is about how we do the right thing. and doing the right thing is invariably the most cost-effective course of action. If we continue the way that we are and we don't remodel services as set out within these strategies, it will cost the council and it will cost the public purse a lot more. So we have to do things differently, and we have to remodel some of the services that we've got to meet the need. And we are a growing population as a county borough, and when the population grows, the proportion within that population who have care and support needs may stay the same, but the total numbers increase. So I think council needs to be mindful of that when budgets are set, that, you know, if there are more children in schools, then schools get more money, don't they? If there are more people who are getting older and living with disabilities and frailty, then that, you know, equally is something that needs to be considered. What we have to make sure that we do in taking this forward is that there are robust business cases. So Pete mentioned a couple of times business justification cases. So when you are developing a service, you have to look at what is required, not just in terms of capital, if it's an accommodation-based service, but also the revenue requirements. And then you've got to compare that, haven't you, with the option of doing nothing. There's always an option appraisal in a business case, and doing nothing often will be an option that comes out as quite suboptimal, because if you do nothing and you continue the way that you are, then costs increase and increase based on a suboptimal way of working. The final thing I would say is that these commissioning strategies need to be seen alongside the strategy for adult social care, which will come before you, and the 3-year strategic plan for children's social care, because they shouldn't be seen in isolation for what we're doing around prevention and well-being and around practice and workforce. So those 4 elements need to come together, because if you get that strength-based working right across the piece, then the services that you need are less, because we're supporting more people preventatively, but the people who do need those care and support needs, invariably their needs are more complex and multifaceted, and you do need to make sure that you've got the right services while still continuing to maximise their independence. So yeah, in the context of everything.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you, Jane. So moving on, my first question that I've got coming in is from Councillor Maxine Lewis. So can I bring you in, Councillor Lewis, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. To be honest, listening to the Deputy and others, I think my question's been answered. I wanted to know, is there a mechanism to say no at some point? We can't do this. You know, we just haven't got the money. You know, what happens then? You know, I mean, don't get me wrong, I know you're all fighting for more money, but I'm just afraid that we are going to run out of money. Where does it come from? Where do we say no?
Claire.
Yeah, so we've got a statutory duty to assess and to meet needs. Now, in terms of that assessment, we look at whether somebody's got an eligible need, whether they've got an eligible need for care and support. And then in looking at how those needs are met, we take into account everything that individual has access to in terms of their own lives. So what resources they have themselves in terms of their friends, their family, the wider community. And then, you know, if there is an assessed need for care and support, what are the financial resources that they have available to them in terms of meeting that need. So the commissioned care service that we're talking about here really is the last resource. You know, we work in a strength-based way to understand what is available to an individual in their own life, in their own community. Now, statutorily, we are allowed to take resources into account when we are commissioning services. You know, you do get onto some very tricky legal grounds. So, you know, you will have seen cases not from Bridgend, but from other parts of the UK in the media, from adult social care perspective. I think Bristol was the most recent, where the council were challenged about saying that people with 24/7 needs should be supported in a care home setting, and actually the council then changed their policy position in terms of that. So I think we've got to do this in the right way. We do need to take resources into account. We do need to ensure that we are being cost effective and have got the most cost-effective ways of delivering services. We need to be very cognizant of the legislation, both in terms of the primary legislation and case law in this area. And we need to work with and alongside individuals for them to have their very best lives in doing that. But we you know, what this these set of strategies are around is the most cost-effective way of meeting the needs that we are legally obliged to meet.
Thank you. Councillor Gebbie.
Thank you very much, Chair. Councillor Lewis, you specifically asked a question, and I'll be very blunt. Yes, we say no. And we say no with much more regularity than we ever have done previously. But we need to be creative when we're saying no, and we need to be saying that your need can be met in another way, and that doesn't necessarily mean a package of care. And some of it might be something that people and our residents can do for themselves. And I think we need to be asking people to do so much more for themselves. I think there's an over-reliance on what we can do, what we can deliver, and what we are actually responsible for. So I do think we need to have a different conversation in relation to that. But that's a longer term programme, and we're going to have some fights along the way with particular communities who have an expectation that we are responsible and we will deliver. So.
Thank you. Does that answer the question for you, Councillor Lewis?
It does. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Watham?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I've got a question on page 12, the top paragraph on non-accommodation based priority areas. There are 5 bullet points there. So basically, I was wondering if we could have further information in relation to these strategies. For example, a bit more meat on the bone to let us know how they've been developed and what they're going to do. And obviously then, is there a financial implication when they are brought into being?
Thank you. Who would like to take that? Claire?
Happy to take it, and other colleagues may well come in as well. So there's more detail on each of these in the appendices, I would say. So there is more detail in the papers that you've had, and then behind those appendices in the commissioning strategy, there's more detail again. So we'll just talk through them briefly one by one. So the placement support service to ensure the right multi-agency therapeutic input for children, young people and their carers. We've had some resource through from Welsh Government under the policy known as the Eliminating Profit from Children's Social Care Policy to support us to do that. What this investment is doing is developing a team to support foster carers and in-house residential services to keep children's placement stable. We know if those placements break down, that there is a significant risk of those children coming into high-cost residential independent care services, which cost the council a lot more money. So it is cost effective. What I would highlight is that investment from Welsh Government is short term. It's 2-year investment, and obviously the need for this investment and stabilisation of those in-county residential and foster care placements is a lot longer than 2 years. But that's what that one is. The next one around developing local foster services, I think members are very aware that we're always trying to recruit additional foster carers into our in-house services, and we work locally, regionally, nationally to do that, and we will continue to do that because we know that for most children who are within our care, that is the best outcome for them to live with local foster carers, and they get better outcomes, and it's also more cost effective as well. Review and strengthen accommodation pathways for children leaving care. There's some more detail around this within the commissioning strategy. This is around children and young people who we have responsibility for, up to 25, our care leavers. A number of them move from foster care or residential placement into what's called supported living. You know, we know that we've got a challenge in terms of housing in this county borough. Some of them become delayed and over supported in that supported living. So if there was a smoother move on pathway for them into long-term generic tenancies, then that would be more cost effective and actually cost the council less money. So we're working with colleagues in housing very closely around that. Strengthen our offer of support to children with disabilities, their families, including those on the neurodevelopmental pathway. As Councillor Gebbie will tell you, the Regional Partnership Board has a very significant priority around neurodevelopmental pathways and making sure there's the right offer for children, families, adults who are waiting for a diagnosis, and indeed those who do have a diagnosis. There is some regional integration fund money supporting services in this area, and also, you know, working with the health board, looking at what they do in this area. So we're very much part of an integrated way of working. We know if we don't get that support in early to children and families on these pathways, that there is a significant risk that those family situations break down. They come into our care, they may end up in long-term residential, which again costs the council a lot more. So we need to get that right support at the right time. And the final bullet there, strengthen our support for children who are at risk or likely to be at risk of childhood exploitation. If we were to share with you the details of those children who are in residential care at the moment, what you would see and what we've seen over the last number of years is a significant increase in the incidence of both criminal and sexual exploitation of our children, and that very frequently drives high-cost individual placements, often bespoke placements on a one-to-one basis for those children and young people because of the risk of exploitation. Again, if we get the support into them early and we prevent that escalation of need in the communities in which they live, that is more cost effective than those placements. And again, we're working on a regional basis around these services. So that's in brief, and I think there is more detail in the appendices.
Thank you. Laura?
Yeah, I was just going to sort of concur with what Claire has said, really, and just to sort of revisit what you said originally in terms of, you know, we all recognise that there is a significant overspend within children's social care, and that is entirely attributable to placements of children and young people from Bridgend in high-cost independent provision. And what I would say is when you look at all of these non-accommodation based priority areas, they're all connected to that agenda around trying to reduce the number of children who require that type of care. Because if we start to develop these services and provide these services to children, young people and their families earlier on in their childhoods, then what we know is that that will help us to prevent their needs escalating and them ending up in very high risk scenarios where they need placements of the nature you're already very familiar with.
Realistically, though, if a child is at risk of exploitation in their home place as they are, the only option is really to remove them from that, isn't it? So is it, or is there another option? Right, thank you. Cheers.
Yeah, absolutely. I can just say, first of all, that there are children in Bridgend who live in Bridgend who are at risk of exploitation, and they still live with their families in their communities. And we manage those scenarios, supporting those children and families through, for example, by placing them on the child protection register or referring them to specialist services. There are lots of other options for those children, but what we need to look at is how effective are those approaches that we offer at the moment? What other services do we need to develop so that we can prevent even more children escalating? So it's wraparound services. We do have some, but they're very limited. So that's what we need to look at. We need to look at the cohort of children where we don't manage that risk effectively at home and their needs end up escalating.
Thank you. Councillor Gebby?
Thank you very much, Chair. I think it's worth reflecting on. We're trying to manage risk, and one of the biggest risks may be with a child living at home who is at risk of child exploitation, irrespective of whatever exploitation that is that they can vote with their feet. And it may be that we are safer keeping that child at home with good management of that child and family than it is to remove them and for them to start going missing, which is not a good position to be in, especially when a child is being exploited anyway, because then they will run to their whoever's exploiting them for them to look after them, whether that be with money, whether that be with drugs, whether that be with sexual favours, putting them out at work is what I want to say very nicely in a public meeting. And we do need to do it safely. So it's much, much safer on occasion for a child to stay at home with the family, because quite often whoever's exploiting them doesn't live in their house, they live outside of it. Thanks very much, Chair.
Yeah, and I think you raise a really good point there about risk and risk management, because 9 times out of 10, that's what this directorate is doing, is risk management, not just for children, but for adults as well. and to manage a risk that potentially could happen is not it's not a cheap thing to do, really, is it? Let's be honest. And I don't think other directorates face that issue and that problem. Their directorates aren't based on risk in the same way that this one is. So I think that's something that we need to be cognizant of when looking at budgets and why budgets are so high for this directorate. Claire, did you want to come back?
I just want to also just emphasise the importance of partnership working. So, you know, when Laura and Councillor Gebby were talking there, those decisions in terms of management of risk need to be multi-agency decisions, and we need to work with partners both across the council in areas like youth justice, in areas like education and family support, also with our colleagues in South Wales Police, the Health Board, etc., the third sector, in terms of that whole community approach to safeguarding you know, children and young people, particularly those who are at risk of exploitation, and that common understanding of risk, because there can be, you know, if we, you know, a risk if we don't work in that way, that partners can say, well, this is better managed out of our area because this is presenting an issue here, but we know that can often just be moving the problem. But in order for everybody to feel comfortable about managing those risks within areas, there's got to be the right multi-agency set of arrangements and the right service response, which is where the commissioning strategy comes in. Those areas of Wales which manage this better, which tend to be the cities because they've got more experience in this area, have got really well developed multi-agency teams and services, and we've been doing a lot of work on our CTM footprint to say, what does that look like for us? We're not a big city, but a lot of those issues face us as much as they do face the big city. So what does that look like? And that's what that priority is around.
I think you've raised a really salient point there, actually, and I would in no way ask you to be critical of our partners, because that would be completely unprofessional, and I wouldn't ask you to do that. However, I am aware that perhaps our partnership works very differently to the larger cities, where it works far more smoothly and things like that, because the issues they're bigger there, aren't they? You know, ours is a microcosm really of what they've got, and I think that perhaps falls off the radar a little bit when it comes to multi-agency working. It is a concern because I am aware that sometimes our multi-agency working doesn't run as effectively or smoothly as perhaps it could, and I just wonder if you think there's more work to be done there to bring that up to a not an acceptable level, but you know, a smooth working level, shall we say?
I guess I would be really positive about our multi-agency working in Bridgend. You know, if you reflect on the recent JICPA report, it was very positive about partnership working. I think partnership working in adults equally, you know, has been a strength in Bridgend for many years. And you know, I've worked in bigger areas, and it can be more difficult. I think our size here in Bridgend and the personal nature of those relationships, you know, expressed through the MASH, for example, through our integrated teams in adults, gives us a really good foundation. What we don't have, which the bigger areas have, is the resources that can be drawn upon, because they have those economies of scale. So that's where we need to make those Cumtaf Morgannwg partnerships work as effectively for us as if we were a city area. And it means we might not have everything in Bridgend, but we need to make sure we've got access to what, you know, a city would have on that footprint, and work in that different way. And that regional context probably is a little bit more challenging than if we were just one bigger authority on a city footprint.
I think as well, just before I bring Councillor Gebby in, I think part of the issue is that when things fail here, it's more obvious. It's, you know, it's a bigger thing when it happens here than perhaps where it's in a wider context, in a wider city with more population and things like that. It's very much under the microscope. So that's a concern as well, that we've got to get it right, because if we don't, it is a big issue here, you know, because we are a tight-knit community. Councillor Gebby?
Thank you very much, Chair. I've just been reflecting on what Claire said, and the Regional Partnership Board is the first out of 1 in 7. We're 1 of 7 in Wales. We're the first regional partnership board to appoint an integrated health and social care director. So he covers across the 3 councils, the Health Board and our voluntary sector organisations. And one of the reasons we were really keen to do that is because we wanted him to step outside of Bridgend, so to speak, and RCT, and Merthyr, and the Health Board, and his ownership needs to be in the Regional Partnership Board, because we need to have those regional arrangements. Because the more we can have those regional arrangements, the better it is for all the children in Cwmtaf Morgannwg area. Because, like Claire says, we haven't got the resources that most cities have. So on the regional footprint, the idea is that we will have more resources, particularly, and our ND folk is what I want to say. And that's because it shouldn't matter if you're waiting for a diagnosis of any neurodevelopmental disorder. You should have the support before you even need that. And your diagnosis should not be the be-all and end-all. It's about actually living with who you are, and that can affect anybody. So we don't know how many people are on the ND scale, you know, and when you think about women mask it. So, you know, we've got lots of 40, 50-year-old women that are now being diagnosed as having an ND problem, or I don't know, you know. It's just really hard when you haven't got the resources at a capital level that we need to have, and we need to have that as a Cwmtaf level. So if we've got that, that would be much better for all our children, young people, our ND community, and our older persons, because the fact, and indeed I will share some PowerPoints if I send them on to Cabinet Committee. They can send them around to all the committee. And part of that is around what plans we're having around a falls, because Bridgend is the only one in Cwmtaf Morgannwg with a falls service. But there are ones being developed because it is good practice. It saves resource for our ambulance. So, you know, I can whittle on about this for hours, but I'm not sure committee members would want me to.
No, thank you very much. No, we do appreciate what you're saying. We do. So I'm going to move us along to, move us along. I'm going back to page 10, and I believe that Dave Harrison, you had a question here, Councillor Harrison. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I must say thank you very much for the officers and staff for the very in-depth report that's been put before us this morning. I'm looking at the transformation and planning group structure. Who's going to be sort of overall responsible for this directorate?
Are you directing that question to Claire?
Claire, I should imagine.
Yeah.
Thanks for the question, Councillor Harrison. So we've got a transformation board which I chair, and then as you can see from the sort of subgroup structures there are boards that are chaired by Laura as head of children's, by Jackie as chair of adult services. Now our board reports up to corporate management board, which reports to cabinet corporate management board, which reports to cabinet. So it's part of the usual governance really of the council. We've obviously got strong interrelationships with those regional planning groups, which we've already talked about in the context of the regional partnership board, but our governance is internal to the council and part of the council governance.
Thank you. I think as well, following on from that question, I mean, where will it sit? Who's responsible? You know, how will it work? Those sort of questions. I think it does again come back to finance as well, because the one thing that we don't want to do is to have this strategy come forward, and it is a great strategy. Don't get me wrong on that. And for it to destabilise other areas of the directorate as well, you know, whether it's with staffing resources or whether it's with funding, because we don't know if there's grant funding coming through. It doesn't say in here, which I understand from what Pete said, it's, you know, very much in a draft strategy at the moment, but we've got no idea of how it's going to come through, how we're going to resource it, who's going to be responsible. So I think that's one of the concerns, wasn't it, that we brought forward. I don't know if you want to say anything on that particular part, but no.
I think we've talked a lot about the resources. You know, this is probably the most challenging for any of us who've worked in public services financial context that we've ever worked in, isn't it? So, you know, how we, you know, assess, meet, need and commission services to meet those needs, which is what this is around, has to be done within the financial envelope of the council. you know, and we understand that this has got to be, and the challenge is quite right, about doing that in the most cost-effective way, drawing on grant street funding when we can access it, drawing on capital as an investor save, you know, in terms of the revenue. Can I sit here and say to you, if we do all of this, we will deliver significant cashable savings? No, but can I say this is more cost effective than the way that we work at the moment, and given the demographics that we face, that if we don't do this, it would cost the council and public services more? Yeah, yes, I can say that quite clearly.
Thank you. Pete, can I bring you in, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, on that chart, so you can see is the green box on there. So we do have a Housing with Care Fund project board, and that is co-chaired by both Claire as the Director for Social Services and Wellbeing, but also Caris Lord as well, who is the Section 151 officer. So basically how it works is you have the kind of planning groups feeding up to that. So in terms of as and when these proposals are being worked up, developed, we are producing business justification cases now, which are going to get reported up into that board, as well as the improving outcomes for the Joneses board. So that's ultimately, is it the right thing in terms of what the population needs assessment, market stability reports. But with regard to the pound signs, those meetings are jointly chaired now by Claire and Caris. So yeah, we will have business justification, and finance will have a very keen sight over those as well. So it will be bringing in that bigger, broader, full council budget picture as well.
Thank you for that clarity, because actually I had noticed the initials, but I didn't realise who it was. So going forward as well, maybe if we could, you know, make that clearer as well, because I know that members have missed that as well. Thank you. Councillor Harrison, content with that?
Yes, and with some of the previous explanations, I think a lot of that question has been answered, and it's the same as every new strategy. I think you don't know where it's going until you implement it, and basically what it's going to cost until it's implemented. And what I've seen and read, I think we're on the right track with this, and I'd just like to thank everyone for their efforts. Thank you. Thank
you. Moving on. On page 11, 3.5, Institute of Public Care, we heard from Pete earlier that they're a critical partner, which is what we love to hear, because that's what hopefully we are as well here in Scrutiny. So I just wondered if, as part of them helping us with this and coming forward with their reports, have they given us any sort of indication of UK best practice as well that we can follow? If so, what was that, please? Thank you. Sorry, is that Pete that you want to answer? He can't see you. No.
No,
Pete, you're in.
Yeah, no worries at all. Yeah, and to be honest, it was quite reassuring and quite refreshing, because a lot of our integrated services, so in terms of how we're working currently, they did say it's quite leading edge. So they didn't necessarily come in with many suggestions. It was more in terms of, okay, what are you suggesting? They did feedback as well, just in terms of the achievability of it. But I know we've discussed that already through kind of the deputy leader and Claire, in terms of, but how we've drafted this is very much, this is what the population assessment and the market stability report is telling us. The key bit of the report probably is it's got to be done within available resources. So that's kind of absolutely critical. So that's going to be the mantra that we are kind of working towards. But yeah, with IPC, they as I say, they spent quite a bit of time right from the inception in terms of what's the actual strategy document itself look like, to bringing in those components as well. So yeah, a lot of the input was in children's services, the children, young persons and transition plan, because obviously they've been working quite a lot with us, the Institute of Public Care have in that area, and transition as well. So the transition area were those important components. So yeah, unfortunately they didn't have the magic wand in terms of something to solve everything, unfortunately, but it was refreshing that we're on the right journey anyway. But yeah, they were able to bring things in around the core and cluster elements in particular. So that was the working age adults, lifelong conditions and complex needs. So yeah, that they were able to bring in some helpful support, and even if just checking, does this look about right? And I think that's really important, because sometimes there's an expression our old director used to say, wasn't it? If you always do what you've always done, you've always get what you've always got. So yeah, and I can see a few of you kind of mouthing it as we're going. So yeah, it's one of those where yeah, it was refreshing, reassuring to see that yeah, we are going in the right direction, tweaked, refined, with the support from IPC as well.
Thank you. And you mentioned there the core and cluster. So just on page 12, I've got Councillor Lewis in for another question again on that matter and the close to home as well. So Maxine Lewis, please.
Yeah. It was just really, what is this core and cluster? And another part then is reading through not just children's social services, but the adult. Why aren't BCBC premises being utilised for things? For example, Glanravan residential home is still standing, it's been empty for years. Why hasn't it been brought back into use? Can I just ask that? So the core and cluster thing, and then
Yeah. So I think we've got two questions there. Core and cluster, what is it, and what's the difference between a core and cluster as well? I think because there's no, it's a phrase that you've put into this strategy, and it's new to us, so we're not quite clear what it is, and neither will the public be. But also as well, the close to home and the home that Councillor Lewis has mentioned there as well, please, the details on that. So I don't know who wants to take what. Pete? Yeah. Happus?
Yeah, is that okay, Claire? Yeah, so traditionally, I guess what we have, and under regulation as well, so the Care Inspector at Wales, what they have is you have your care homes, which is 24/7, and that's the environment. We're all fully aware of those. They have care home regulation, and then you have domiciliary care regulation as well. And what we have is that middle ground then. So we have our supported living services, extra care services also come under that. And what that means is individuals, they'll have their own tenancies because they don't have their own tenancies in care home services. So in effect, it's their own properties. But what we have then is we have care and support pretty much on site 24/7 in terms of throughout the year. So those are our kind of supported living services. Where we're talking about core and cluster is very much, it's a case of, does everybody in the service necessarily need the full 24/7 support? So what you might have is accommodation that's linked to it. So it's almost like you hear the term hub and spoke model as well. So it's almost like you'd have a property which has the 24/7 support on it. You might have some flats or independent flats that are around it where you'll just have kind of lower levels of need and support. So where that staff group can go out and kind of deliver some outreach support. So that's very much the essence of what kind of core and cluster actually is. So it's recognizing that not everybody might need the full 24/7, but they can have kind of links to it. So it prevent kind of any escalation of need. And it can also be termed, I know we use the terms step up, step down, but it's a case of if they have been in the 24/7 service, it's a case of, okay, can we step them down more towards independent living? So that's very much the thinking and principle behind the kind of core and cluster. As I say, some will call it the hub and spoke. Again, there's a little bit more detail on that within the strategy itself, which kind of sets that out a little bit more. And then in terms of closer to home, traditionally what happened, so these are individuals with a learning disability with very complex needs who would traditionally have been placed in very high cost residential placements. So what we have is the closer to home model is the very kind of higher level, higher complexity of that supported living. So they do have their own tenancy. So that they'll have kind of be living in a property. They tend to be 2, 3, 4 bedroom properties, but there's very high levels of need. And due to the high levels of need, they're often joint funded packages as well. So often there's health input into those schemes as well. But it's under the principle of, as I say, it's that mid ground between care homes and independent living, but it's the higher kind of levels, higher complexity of need in terms of the closer to home model. And as the name suggests, previously, we were making high cost placements all around the country, sometimes often over the border as well, to deliver the needs for individuals with learning disabilities with higher needs. So it's a case of bringing them, as the name suggests, closer to home. But those do tend to be, the higher complexity kind of, but under that kind of supported living model. Did that cover the first question?
I think you did. Does that answer that for you, Councillor
it
Lewis?
does, yes, thank you.
Yeah, and it covers the core and cluster question as well for you, yes?
Yeah.
Okay, lovely, brilliant. Thank you, Pete. Moving on then to page 14, just at the bottom, very, very quickly, on the recommendations, final bullet point, prior to submitting to Cabinet for approval in 2024, early 2024. I just wondered if we had a date on when that was going to Cabinet, please.
I think probably realistically it would be April rather than March Cabinet.
So if it's going to Cabinet in April, obviously then that's after budget setting for this year. So are we anticipating future years for budget, or is there something in the budget line for this year? How's that going to work?
I think as the report says, there's no specific financial implications from this report as is. This report is a direction of travel about the remodelling work that we need to do across. So the expectation will be that we manage within the resources that we have. You know, obviously some of the developments that are needed will require capital. We will anticipate that we'll have business cases, business justification cases go into the Regional Partnership Board under the capital funding that they can access. That does require some match funding from the local authority, which can be, you know, in kind or can be actual cash match. So all that will need to be worked through in the business cases. So, you know, my assumption will be that the financial implications will need to draw that out for the Cabinet report, not in minute terms to say this is the actual cost, but to say, you know, that the delivery of each element of this strategy will require those robust business cases. We'll need to identify what can be achieved within current resources. If there are capital requirements, it'll be subject to business cases. Indeed, and those business cases need to pick up on the revenue requirements as well. So, you know, that will be the methodology of implementation, will be through those business cases. You know, new procurement and commissioning strategies will be required for some elements of what's in the plan. For example, it refers to the recommissioning of domiciliary care within the lifetime of the strategies, and that will need a procurement strategy attached to it, won't it, which may well cap the amount that you know, providers can bid against in terms of being on the framework going forward. So all those things, you know, will be, the detail will come afterwards, but this is to seek approval for the direction of travel. These are the things we need to do, so we're not just doing what we always did and seeing budgets and spend particularly increase the way it always has.
Thank you, because I am aware, I understand what you're saying about it's not going to attach a cost at this stage, sort of thing, but further down the line it will, and that's obviously what the business case will state. But I'm just concerned that time's ticking, and we do need to get this ball rolling, because it is a good ball to get rolling, quite frankly. You know, I would like to see this strategy implemented, but it's just how we do that crossover period as well, because there will be that crossover financially that is a concern. So yeah, thank you for that. Right, moving on. So we're into Appendix A, and bear with me 1 second. My next question, if I can find it, apologies, is on page 25. So it's just from myself as well. We've got the heading on page 24 that says strengthen our offer of support for children with disabilities and their families, including those on the neurodevelopmental pathway. And then across the page, on page 25, under commissioning intentions, it mentions specifically about ASD and neurodiversity. Well, the two are two very different things. Right, this is where I've got to put my teeth in. A neurodiversity in a person is something that will put you on a neurodevelopmental pathway. So can we just have a bit of clarity about what we're talking about there, please? Who wants to take that? Do you want to take it? Yeah, absolutely. No worries. Don't forget to introduce yourself.
Hi, so my name's Shagufta Khan. I'm Social Work Lead for Adult Social Care. So specifically around the links between ASD and neurodivergence. So neurodiversity is quite a range. It's an incredible wide range of various different presenting needs. ASD sits within that umbrella of neurodiversity. So the two necessarily aren't completely separate. ASD sits within, so if you think of ND as an umbrella, there is some work at the moment that's happening on a regional basis around ASD, and whether that ASD pathway now needs to be widened to transfer into neurodiversity, because there are individuals that have other presenting needs that may not be ASD, but have presenting needs that sit underneath that umbrella. And whilst regionally we've focused on ASD as a pathway to access resources and services, it means that somebody else that is underneath the umbrella doesn't have access to such, but may have more needs or be in more crisis. So there is some wider work that's being done at the moment around the ASD pathway and the need to potentially widen it. But if you think of ASD under the umbrella of neurodiversity, I hope I've done that justice.
Yeah, you have actually, and that does clarify what's going on there, because as I say, there was a conflation of the two statements there in the heading and then the explanation as to what was going on. So it's good to hear that clarity. So thank you. That's good. Thank you. Moving on as well, on page 25, I've got Councillor Harrison again for a question, please.
Thank you, Chair. Under the bullet points, the paragraph under there, some resources for this service will be drawn from existing partnership arrangements. Are we talking of human resources, financial resources? And again, depending on future demand projections, the capacity of the service to be agreed, additional resources, again, are they human or financial? And have we actually been in consultation with our partners that this could be happening in the future? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Who wants to take that? Councillor Gebby?
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much, Councillor Harris. We do not expect to have all partners on board with this strategy until 2028. So it's currently in development. I know because I started that engagement with residents. And what I would say is that all partners need to work together on this. I think the one thing I would say is it's not about money. We need to look at the resources that we've already got. It's not about spending more money. It's about utilising the resources that we've got more effectively. And that means we'll have a better outcome for the families that need to use that service. I know that because of and the report isn't released yet, just so we're very clear. I know that from the report that is currently in draft format with RPB, one of the things that's being raised, and I did refer to it earlier, is people aren't worried about the diagnosis. Although what I would say is there's extra spend and extra capacity going in from the health board in order that they reduce their waiting lists, because pre-Christmas it was 5 years. They've done a targeted piece of work currently, and they've got the diagnosis list or the waiting list down to 2 years. So, you know, that's a massive change in the way that we're working, but that is a whole regional approach. So it's something that is coming. It is going to take some time trying to get through the governance arrangements of 3 different councils, the health board and our voluntary and third sector, I want to say, is a challenge in itself. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you.
That the future is being prepared for, basically, and that the partners are being included. But it's just nice to know what sort of says resources, but what type of resources. So we've cleared that up, and thank you very much.
Yeah, no, it is good to hear that we're on the same page with our partners with this. So you're quite right there. Lovely, thank you. I'm going to move us on to page 30, and I'm just going to reference page 30, page 49 and page 52 with this, because there's a number of stats in here that have been quoted. So on page 30, we've got the population stat of 145,000. At the moment, that's up at 147,000. So we're a good chunk out on the population there. So we need up-to-date stats on that, please. And then going through here onto page 49, we've got a conflation of the two. So we've got qualitative stats there, and we've got figurative. So down at the bottom, we've got dementia in that paragraph where it says about 62%, but then on the graph, it says 12,000. So there's a mixing there, and that makes it quite difficult to read. And then finally, as well, for the stats on page 52, I just wanted to pick up, because on the bottom chart there, it says no, the number awaiting care is 22. But then if you look in the paragraph above that, it says that's from the 23rd of August last year. So I'm wondering if we've got more up-to-date stats there. So if we can just have a look at that when we go through to put this into a strategy, if we can get those in that format that runs, so it's easier for the public to follow as well, that would be very much appreciated. But apart from that, that's my gripe. So if that's all I can pick up on, that's great. So yes, councillors, any other questions coming up to page 52, please? Councillor Hughes?
Hi, sorry, I probably, I'm on the wrong page now, I think, or I'm on the wrong bit, but it's just my thoughts that I think I just would say at this point. Obviously, the strategy is excellent, and it's good to see the direction we want to travel in moving forward to get the best outcomes for our residents. For me, the out-of-county children's residential placements for a long time have seen a huge spend. And given that, a little while ago in one committee, we asked for some figures, and I think it was 18 young people, 6 in and 12 out, and the end of year spend on that, you were talking £7.5 million. But I suppose what I'm thinking is, how do you, it's such a balancing act, isn't it? Because when you are putting things in place and we want preventative work, there's excellent things going on with early help and social services and preventative work. So, you make your in-house facilities, but needs change and things change in years to come. So I suppose I wanted to just recognise that I realise how difficult that must be. How do we, really, I'm sort of thinking, how are we going to do this? Because it's been a thing that's been, ongoing for a long time. Really, really welcome the strategy, but just think it must be difficult for you where to go with it and how you manage that, because ultimately we don't want those people with complex needs, because we want to help them sooner. But really, there will always be a few that will need that high-end complex care. So I suppose we're not looking at this in a year or two time, or we be looking at this a little way off, I would imagine, as it's all sort of been such a big thing to try and conquer then for many years. That's all. Hope that makes sense. Sorry.
No, it absolutely does. And I'm going to bring Claire in for a response on this. Thank you.
Yeah, firstly, just to thank Councillor Hughes for the comments, because it's exactly the challenge that we face, really. So, we are trying through the 3-year strategic plan for children to work more preventatively, to work in a very targeted way with early help to prevent children, requiring care and support coming onto the child protection register. And ultimately, the assumptions made and the outcomes that we're focused on through that 3-year strategic plan is to safely reduce the number of care experienced children, and a small proportion, about 6.5% of those care experienced children, are in those high cost residential placements, and we spend a disproportionate amount of our investment in children's social care on that relatively small number of children. And not only is that a large amount of money that the council spends, there's a big opportunity cost there for doing more preventatively. So we're trying to, as we call it, shift that balance of care. What that doesn't mean is that if the next child that comes in, requires that independent residential placement at this moment in time, that is still the decision that needs to be made in the best interest of that child. But overall, by being more preventative, if children do come into the care system, supporting foster carers better, recruiting more in-house foster carers with that additional support, we should reduce the numbers in terms of that big spend there. And what we're trying to do, I suppose, through the population needs assessment and through the modelling work within these commissioning strategies, is to try and model what that overall position in terms of services needs to look like going forward, because we know that if we plan more in-house residential for the numbers that we do anticipate we will have, that's more cost effective than the out-of-county and independent residential. So that's what these strategies are trying to do, really, using the best evidence and information that we have. But it doesn't mean that things can't come from left field and mean that the assumptions that we've made take you off course. So the biggest thing that's come from left field in recent years is obviously the COVID-19 pandemic, and we've seen massive impact in both adult services and children's services on the needs that we're dealing with, and the population needs assessment captured a lot of that. But that's exactly what we're trying to do, and that's why we've had external support in terms of challenging us, as well as yourselves as a committee, to try and say, are we getting this as right as we can based on best evidence and data that is available to us.
Thank you. Pete, can I bring you in as well, please?
Yeah, thank you. I think it's a really important point. Stuff doesn't stand still, does it? And that's the thing. And I know we've set these out as 5-year kind of priorities for us, but it's one of those, they will be closely monitored, regularly monitored. So we've made reference to the planning groups and kind of the governance and oversight in terms of this. So what we'll be doing is, right, what have we been doing against these priority areas? Are they still our priority areas? Are those left field things coming in? So yeah, we will be able to adapt, because I think those are key things, and not necessarily things that us in local government are famed for, is adaptability and flexibility. But though that's really, really important, that's what we're looking to build into them. And that's the way we're going to have to work, as I say, going forward then.
Thank you. Does that answer the question for you, Councillor Hughes? You're on mute. Yes, I'm thinking.
Yes, thank you both. Sorry.
No, that's great. Thank you. Laura, did you want to come in?
Yeah, again, I just wanted to say thank you, for sort of the recognition around how complex this area of the service is really, and what we're responding to and trying to respond to differently for all the reasons outlined. And ultimately, it's about doing the best thing for our children and young people, isn't it? And I think I suppose wanted to reassure committee really, and I think hopefully all of you will already guess this, but none of the children in our high cost placements went straight into residential care or straight into high cost independent provision. All of them we've attempted to work with on a care and supportive child protection basis. And all of them have had lots of other placements before this as well. One of the children has had 24 placements before being placed where they are at the moment. I think for us, it's about learning from those children's previous experiences to look at, well, what have we offered them in the past? Why have those 24 other placements not worked? What can we do differently? And this is where what we do know is that most of these children have lived with quite a high number of foster families, but they haven't been foster families with the right skill set and experience that is needed, and the right really intensive wraparound support that they need to care for these children safely and consistently, so those children can stay in foster placements instead. So yeah, just to say that we are looking at that whole picture really, and that is what this strategy is about really, and that's why that is a priority for us, so those children don't have all those experiences and moves before having to end up in this high cost provision.
Thank you. Moving on as well, I have got Councillor Kaparos on page 54 with a question, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, on page 54, there's a table about halfway down that shows some great success with people no longer needing care following the reablement, short-term reablement, from about half up to 83% no longer requiring ongoing care. I was wondering, well, first of all, congratulations for that, but I was wondering if you could tell us what does that programme look like?
Yeah, would you like to take a jump there?
There we are. I'll take that one. So in terms of our reablement offer within adult social care in Bridgend, it's quite a very much a strength-based way of supporting the Joneses. It is a multidisciplinary offer, so essentially Mrs. Jones may have some presenting needs. So if we take a case study of Mrs. Jones that's leaving hospital, that might be the easiest way to illustrate this. So Mrs. Jones leaves hospital with some presenting needs and a change in her physical health. Our reablement offer will be a multidisciplinary offer where we have carers that have a specific way of working with Mrs. Jones to completely build on her strengths and hopefully get her back to her daily living skills prior to a fall or the changes in her health. Working alongside those domiciliary care workers will be a physiotherapist and an OT. Again, they work in a very strength-based way. So the disciplines will work together around a very specific support plan that is very much targeted to building someone's capability back to baseline prior to the crisis that led them to go into reablement. It is a very much a strength-based way of working. They're a team that work very much, kind of alongside each other. So where an OT will be making recommendations, you'll have the care agency, the care workers, they'll be implementing those changes. They'll be looking at innovative ways of Mrs. Jones living in the same environment. So, for example, prior to the fall, Mrs. Jones's routine around her home environment might have been delivered in a set way, while the OT and the care workers working in a reablement model may use changes to create kind of a micro environment. So it's all about really an individual coming in with a set, with a set level, a baseline, and then having a multidisciplinary team approach, very much around building on Mrs. Jones's strengths and capabilities through a rehab program. So it's not necessarily the traditional domiciliary care approach. It's more about where is Mrs. Jones now? What do we need to do in terms of a program of care to try and progress her back to the way that she was previous to the crisis?
Lovely, thank you. Does that answer that for you, Councillor Kaparos?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Yeah, because I'm looking at the stats as well, and they do look like good news. They really do, genuinely, because we're going from 57% on the do you know, I haven't got my teeth in today, reablement packages, up to 83.33. But is the truth of this actually that we have got more individuals wanting reablement, and that actually, whilst we are working harder and we're putting more through, the pressure is still there? Because I've spoken to senior staff at POW who tell me that they can't get individuals out of A&E and up to the wards because the wards can't get people out into the community. So there's obviously that block there because more people are wanting this service. And I know we've spoken about people doing for themselves, et cetera, and we're not doing everything. And I know reablement kind of doesn't fall under that. We have got to help. So is the truth of these stats that we are working harder, but there is still a really big downward pressure and there's a lot more for us to do? If that's the case, is there anything we as a committee can do to help you through our recommendations? And I don't know who I'm going to first. Councillor Gebby, do you want to come in?
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, we have more demand. So yes, we're working harder. We're also trying to streamline that, that part of the report references that we're going to baseline reablement again, but that's because we want to get more people through the reablement package. What we do know is if we provide dom care to people at home, their reliance becomes ever more increasing. And the more that we can get them through a reablement package, the better it is for us. I think the one thing that I would say is that we've got an ageing demographic. So we're going to have increased demand year on year. And, all the forecast is telling us that, because I don't know about any of you, but I'm not getting any younger as I sit here in chambers today. So I do think we need to consider how we're going to do what's best for our residents. But I'm going to hand over to Claire because I'm sure she's going to give you a bit more of a technical answer than I have as well.
Thank you. Can I just note as well that you would get older if this was Alex that was chairing this and it was going slower, not me. So, thank you, Claire.
Thanks very much for the question. No, one of our key priorities is what's reframed in here as resetting reablement. Now, Shugufta's just reminded me that it's not just about reablement. We've got a number of short-term services which aim to do what Shugufta described, which is to maximise people's independence and to enable them to regain or retain those independent living skills. And ultimately, that results in a reduction in their ongoing and long-term care needs. Now, what we saw during the pandemic was a reduction in those going through the short-term services compared to those who went straight into long-term services. And what you then have, as Councillor Gebby's described, is people who get very used to that long-term domiciliary care. It's very hard to withdraw those long-term services when they're in place. So we set ourselves a target of 80% of people who've got an identified care and support need going through a short-term intervention. And one of our priorities is to remodel our services so that in-house we get that bit right before we either provide a long-term service from the in-house service or commission out to the independent sector. And that's the best way also of making the best use of the capacity that we've got in the overall market, because if we overprescribe for people going on to long-term care, there'll be lots of people whose needs can't be met. I think in terms of a recommendation for committee, I think support of that strategy would be really helpful, and support of yourselves as members around that way of working, because often, we might find that families think, mum or dad needs long-term care and that's it, but actually far better for the individual to regain those independent living skills quickly, because if they're lost, they're sort of lost forever, really, aren't they? And most of us want to live our own lives and do for ourselves as long as we possibly can. So that would be very helpful if committee are supportive of that way of working.
Lovely, thank you. All content? I shall move on then. I don't know if anybody has anything up to the final page on page 56 at all. Any more members want to come in and say anything, ask any questions? No? They all seem content. It's lovely. Oh, no, Councillor Lewis, here we go. Go on.
Yeah, sorry about that.
I got away with it then.
I just want to say a massive thank you to everyone in social services, because instead of throwing money at reinventing the wheel, they're just trying to smooth it out and work with what they got. And it's just so difficult. So thank you to everybody.
Thank you, Councillor Lewis. I think that's really important, actually. And I think that the whole committee does realise what a difficult job this is, and to implement a strategy that's as big as this, really, because it is a big and it's a very ambitious strategy. But we do like that is ambitious, because I think that's the way we should be going. We should be a forward-thinking council. We should be ambitious, and we should be innovative. Certainly under the pressures we've got financially at the moment, we have to be innovative. Sorry, again, my teeth. But yes, I think you're doing a good job there. So thank you very much. And thank you very much for bringing the report. And Pete, thank you very much for your time as well. Much appreciated. Thank you.
Take care, everyone.
So, if oh yeah, yeah, there will be, yes, no worries. So if there's no further questions from members, I'd like to thank invitees, and if you're not required for the next report, you may leave the meeting. I'm going to call a very short 5-minute recess as well. So if we can come back for just after 37 minutes past. Thank you.